And so I was confronted or presented with your work on living fossils years ago when I first came into young Earth creation. And I was blown away because, Carl, the evolution, especially the most militant proponents of common descent, they will make arguments, as you iterated, that suggest, okay, dinosaurs exist in a very specific layer, and we don't really find any modern animals or representations with them. And you pointed out, and correct me if I'm wrong, in your presentation here, that we've discovered hedgehogs, possums, ducks, penguins
with the dinosaurs. With the dinosaurs.
Wow.
Parrots.
And so in museums or in schools, they don't present students or guests with that information, do they?
And I've been through these museums, like 104 museums. I keep looking at and I keep checking them. I just checked Los Angeles Natural History Museum a couple of weeks ago through a friend photographing for me. No, they have not fixed this problem, even though we pointed it out, I don't know, 20 years ago now.
Wow. And so it kind of takes away in many ways, their ordering of the fossil record argument, because they'll say, well, evolution has to be true because at the lowest layers you find certain examples, right? Simpler organisms to more complex, but that's not an accurate representation of what we find in the fossil record, is it, Carl?
Right, because I just showed you on this PowerPoint, these are from the lowest layer. There should be nothing modern looking in the lowest layer. And yet this looks like a modern sea pen. This looks like a modern bristleworm. It's the lowest layer, the lowest layer of
the Cambrian. Yeah.
The Cambrian and Precambrian. The echinoderm looks the same, and the sponges look the same. So the lowest layer, no, it's something is wrong here.
So in the Cambrian and the Precambrian, we basically find this sudden appearance of all this phyla, these sophisticated systems and body plans, coral, jellyfish, trilobite with their highly complex eye system, these massively different kinds of organisms. And yet they pop up out of nowhere with no evolutionary precursors.
That's right. And the reason why evolutionists got confused about all of this is they looked in the wrong direction. See, if you go to any layer and just say, oh, wow, look at this extinct animal. That's so crazy, a dinosaur or, a trilobite. But if you just move your eyes over to the other piece of the slab at any layer, oh, look, here's a modern, and a modern. If you look at any layer and just focus on just the extinct animals, you think evolution occurred. If you look at the modern animals, you say, this isn't evolution, this is extinction. These animals went extinct, or some of these animals went extinct. Yeah. So I understand why they made the mistake.
Right.
They focused on extinct animals and they made this big hoopla about dinosaurs and the Precambrian, and they'd always show you the weirdest animals because 90% of the animals that have ever lived on the earth have gone extinct. So you can go to any layer, there's going to be extinct animals in all these layers. But if you want to question it, look for modern animals, and there they are. They jump off the page.
That's amazing. You've done some amazing work. And so what's a good response? I've seen the critics, your proponents of evolution that don't want to tap out and admit that creation is a better explanation. They'll say, well, what we see in terms of your extant animal representations of what we find with the dinosaurs, there are variations. They're different species, so it's not the same. They've evolved over time. What's a good response to that, Carl?
That you're changing the species names, and I want to see if I can pull this back up. You're changing the species names because it's just a quick reminder what we did. But look at this. This is the same animal, but they would say it's different, but it's not different. It's the same animal. They changed the species. I want to show you one more. Here is a dawn redwood, and it's at our botanical garden here in St. Louis. This is a modern dawn redwood limb or branch, and here's a branch fossil found next to a dinosaur. They look exactly the same, and yet they changed the species name. So that's why. Now, there could be different species, but they're so close that a lot of these are no more different than the difference between a Chihuahua and a Beagle, which is the same species.
Right.
But evolution scientists tend to split the species, and they could make 100 different animal types out of dogs, but it's not true. Dogs are just one species, Canis familiaris,
Are we able to zoom in? There's just a couple people in the chat wondering if we can zoom in just to that picture there with the specific. If not, that's okay, Carl.
Yeah.
But you have such great.
I had my guy that was going to help me with all this, and all this is so new because the books just came out, and I haven't really been going around talking that this is a poor presentation audiovisually, but it's about as good as
You're doing a great job.
It's about as good as I could throw together. By the way, here's this Dawn redwood, the sequoia, metasequoia. Here's the modern cone that you find at the bottom of this tree. And here's the fossil cone next to a dinosaur. And this looks perfect in the book. This is all fuzzy because it's a poor presentation on my part, but you get the sense that this is this. I mean, it's so
right. Yeah, it's the same thing.
But look at this. You can't even read the name, but in the red, you can see that they changed the species name of the fossil. So I can't say that all the fossils that look modern are actually the same species as modern, but I have enough doubt to say the theory of evolution has collapsed.
Well, even today, in extant or non-extinct species, we find, as you've pointed out, a lot of diversity. We oftentimes find more diversity within the same species that they label species than across species, Carl. That's in coexisting creatures today. And so in the fossil record, there's a little bit of variation when we compare that which is extinct to today, or just even those creatures that aren't extinct, because as a creationist, within 4,500 years since the flood anyways, we would expect a little bit of variation, would we not?
Well, and yes, you would. But here's a good thing. Go to my second book called Living Fossils, and I'm going to show you variations. And you can see this in the video, Living Fossils. It's our second book, second video. We took photos of like 50 dogs skull. And you compare like a Chihuahua skull to a Great Dane skull to a Beagle skull. They're so wildly different. Yet they're the same species because they can interbreed. So a lot of what they call evolution is just variation within species. Yeah, there's some genetic drift and some genetic bad stuff that comes in, but you don't necessarily have to go there first. You can just say there's variation within a species, lots of it, as we can just see around the world with humans too.
Right. We find a continuum between these various animals, dogs, bears, horses. And so most of these so-called transitional forms put forth by these evolutionists can essentially, as you put it, fit within the variation that I would argue is found in biblical kinds, which is
right.
The pre and post flood diversity. So Andrew coming here as a question, and actually this wasn't the one here, trying to keep the questions in line with what you presented. And so he's asking, is Carl aware of animal fossils, including sponges, that are in strata dated earlier than the Cambrian?
You know what? That does not surprise me. I think I have seen some articles about that, but I am not up to speed on that. That would not be considered my area of expertise. But it wouldn't be surprising that you would have animals below the Cambrian and then the layer below that, the Ediacaran, that you find something else down here besides bacteria, because like, where did all these animals come from? And it's a flood. You'd expect animals to be in all the layers. Exactly. So I don't, Andrew, I would guess you know something, and it's probably correct. It doesn't sound off,
I don't see how an evolutionist can make a case though for the Cambrian phyla, these body plans, trilobite being one of them, jellyfish, so on and so forth, shellfish, how they could evolve though from these precursors found lower than the Cambrian, because are they saying that within that relatively short amount of time, according to the evolutionary timescale, these creatures evolved from bacteria and sponges? Is that what they're trying to say?
Well, they're saying that they evolved from a bacteria,
Yeah.
And, you know, and wow, that's quite the change. A bacteria, you can't even see a bacteria. You need a microscope. And now, by the way, that sea pen I showed you, the fossil sea pen,
Yes.
I don't know if you can see my hands. The sea pen fossil is this big. Like, that's the first fossil. It's a foot tall. And the jellyfish in that same layer in Flinders Range, Eddy-Cairn in Australia, the jellyfish are this big, you know. You're supposed to go from a bacteria you can't see to that. Where are these intermediate steps, you know, for all of them? Arthropods, you know, the trilobites. Where are the trilobite intermediates or the precursors? Yeah.
I want to see the evolutionary ancestors, I want to see that lineage leading up from bacteria or sponge to a trilobite. I want to see the transitions to the highly sophisticated eye system of the trilobite.
Yeah, it would be bacteria to trilobite or bacteria to the sponge or the bacteria to whatever. Yeah, and you shouldn't be put off by that question, because they have thousands and thousands of fossil bacteria, sheets of them. They're easy to collect, and I can show you pictures. I mean, they're in our book 1. So if you got pictures of bacteria, and you got little animal embryos, you know, that are just so small, that you should see, and soft, you should see everything all the way up to, for every animal group. And if you don't, you really need to be asking questions.
Okay, like you said, from the evolutionary story, their philosophy would say sponges and trilobites, and